Thank you, everybody, for joining me on the AgentXcel podcast. And today I'm going to teach on a subject, and the title of the subject is "The Market Has Changed, Have You?" And this is something that I want to go over just because we're in a changing market right now in Arizona. I sell real estate in Arizona. So if you're listening in your other parts of the country, maybe the market hasn't changed for you. But right now, I want to give you some data that's going on right now in Arizona. As we went a few months ago, or not even a few months ago, probably about 7 weeks ago, we were at about 3,500, 4,000 homes on the market in all of Maricopa County. We're now at almost 18,000. So, that's a drastic swing from 4,000 to 18,000 listings on the market in just, 6-7 weeks. So we're seeing a huge change. And what's interesting is in that change, that's the market changing. But now that's why I wanted to talk about this. The market has changed, have you? And I just wrote down notes. It was probably about 6 weeks ago. And at the volume that I sell, I can fill it very quickly. And so I get these data points quickly, just talking to a lot of clients and being involved in a lot of deals. I see things happen. And what I do is I write notes. So I'm just basically someone who teaches myself. And so when I'm getting involved in conversations or the market's switching and things are going different and I have somewhat of a problem, I just go through on my phone usually, and I just make notes as if like I was teaching a class, and I'm really just teaching myself. And I go through and I write down all my thoughts. It's almost a therapeutic way or a diary way of doing my business. And as I write this all down, it helps put my mind in a different perspective. And then from there, what I've learned is then I just go teach it to other agents. So I'm really just solving my own challenges being in the market every day. And then I'm giving myself a framework. And as I give myself that framework, I then usually record, get it out to the agent community. And so that's what I'm doing on this one. So I have titled this class, and this is like literally on my phone. If you're watching the video right now on YouTube, you can see my notes. And like I said, just notes to myself. So I'm going to be looking down and going through some things and just kind of talking about some topics. So the market has changed, have you? So the market is changing, but are you? And that's where, like, I want to go back. So I've been selling real estate for 17 years. And I remember, and I'm not saying this is going to happen in any way, but I remember when like the short sell era came in really quickly. And, we were just selling homes. And all of a sudden it was houses were worth this and the people's loan payoffs were higher. And we were in the short sell, what I call a short sell game. And from there was agents that decided that they weren't going to do short sells. They thought it was the, something that was going to happen maybe for 5 or 6 months, 8 months. And they just didn't want anything to do with it. So they started referring me the business because I wanted to do it because I knew that's what was going to take place probably for the next few years. And I wanted to run a company and I wanted to still do transactions. So I had to learn that. But what the interesting thing and why I bring this up is the market changed. And there were many realtors that didn't want to change how they did their business. And so they started referring work off. And so typically when you're going through these changes, there's not drastically usually less homes selling a month. It's just the market's changing and the homes that are being sold usually by the agents that are able to make that change the quickest and talk to their clients and consult them the fastest. And it's the ones that are usually in front of the issue and not behind the issue. And just think also, for example, here, and like I said, I'm speaking specifically Arizona because that's the market that I work in. So we just talked about the short sell era. Now think about, it was probably a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, where, do you remember we started writing offers that were, 30, 40, 50,000 over list price, 80,000, 100,000 over list price. Then it was waiving the appraisal. Then it was shortening the inspection from 10 days to 7 days. That went from 7 days to 5 days, from 5 days to 3 days. And we were just doing all of this stuff that was just changing. So it was we were working with buyers and doing it one way for so long. And then it was just a drastic swing. And we'd have to explain that to buyers, right? And this is now what's happening to the sellers. It's just things switch around and you just got to be able to explain it. I think the cool part is, people are always buying and selling homes. We just have to figure out how to interpret the market for them and counsel them, calm them down, and get them through the process. So anyways, like when we were going through that switch with buyers, we had to start getting real serious with them. And it was almost like, hey, if you don't have if you can't waive the appraisal, or you can't do this, or you can't do that, you almost at the time couldn't even buy a house. And so we were telling buyers almost that you had to sit on the sidelines if you couldn't meet this criteria. So now with the market switching and we're getting more and more inventory of listings, think of that the same way now with your actual seller. So when you're sitting down at a kitchen table, there's now, instead of just putting the house on the market and getting 19 offers in 24 hours, you're now having to sit through and go through things. And there might now be some sellers that have to sit on the sidelines, and that's totally fine. But your job is to go through how the market works and find the people that are motivated to sell their homes. So I want to go through two things. So, this is how I process everything as things are changing, or I'm trying to figure out something in my business. Is there's always the mindset, and then there's the tactical. So the mindset is always just like getting your mind right. And I've found that the mindset is actually the harder one than the tactical, because the tactical is just really numbers and data. The mindset's emotions, and dealing with the emotions is always hard. So I remember I went probably about 7-8 weeks ago. I went to a real estate convention in Florida, and we probably had about 30, maybe 40 people in a hotel room, high producers. And I remember sitting in there, and the market was just shifting. And I think these agents were all around the country, and not all the markets were shifting, but a lot of them were. They could feel something different with the interest rates going up. There were just different conversations they were having with their clients. And as we were sitting in that room talking about the market, I realized that we were almost the counselors being counseled. And I want to explain that. Like, we were, 40 really, high producers around the country sitting in a room, and we were kind of just freestyling what's going on in the market, what we think is going to go on in the market. And as I was sitting there, I realized like we're counseling. Like it's like if counselors went and met and talked about how to get through counseling sessions with their clients. I feel like as realtors, that's what we are. So it was about 40 realtors there talking about the market, and we were almost a little bit confused, and not confused, I shouldn't say that, but we were going through a different market where we knew that topic had to be addressed. And we were all sitting there willing to hash that subject out and what we were going to do with the market changing and getting more and more inventory. So that's why I bring this up under the mindset section, is like we were having to almost get our mindsets right, because once we get our mindsets right, we can then go out and talk to our clients in a better fashion and help them get their property sold. So I think, also along the lines of mindset is like, you just got to realize like you're still doing the same thing daily. Like that's the cool thing about real estate, is as the market moves around and changes and prices go down, up, buyers market, sellers market, interest rates, at the end of the day, you've got someone who wants to sell their house for usually a reason, and you got someone who wants to buy a house for a reason. And I think if you just always come back to someone needs to sell their house and someone wants to buy a house, you can usually make this all work out. So I find when markets change, you're having to have conversations that you haven't had usually in a while. Now, doing this for 17 years, real estate, I'm able to pull some things out of my playbook that I used years ago. And so I hadn't used them in a long time. So I'm having to brush up my scripts, changing the conversations, the topics that I talk about. But that's really where that's really where it gets uncomfortable, is none of this is hard. And what's interesting is just go back to when there was low inventory on the market and we were having to tell buyers, hey, if you don't waive the appraisal, you're not going to get the house. If you don't go in 50 over, you're not going to get the house. That was hard to say for the first, 1, 2, 10, 20 clients. But after 50, 60, 100, 200 clients that you said that to, you got numb to it. And you just knew, you were so convicted that that's how the process worked, that you were so willing to say that to them. And it's interesting that when the market is 100% that way, you start getting very, very comfortable saying that. It's when the market is switching and you feel like you're the one sounding the alarm, that's when it feels uncomfortable. So what I've realized is as the market's changing, you're just having different conversations with your clients daily. So it just feels, like it's a little bit more emotional, not only for the client, also for you as the realtor, because you haven't had these conversations a lot. But as you start having them more and more, it's going to get easier. And so make sure you go, and this is me talking to myself, right? I wrote down notes and I'm just sharing them with you. So make sure you go from logic and not emotion. And this is important because I was on a call with my coach about 6 weeks ago, and I had told him, I said, it feels like it's slowing down. And my coach is one that talks about, hey, are we going to go from like emotions or are we going to go from logic? And I like that because it felt like the market was slowing down, and it almost was, because the houses weren't selling in a day anymore. We weren't getting 15 offers anymore. The buyers, we didn't have to run out and show them the homes instantly when they hit the market. So it was slowing down. And he got me to look at my spreadsheet, and he's like, is it slowing down like financially, transactionally, or is the market just slowing down? And he was trying to get me to understand, like I said, emotional or logic. And what I found out is we were actually doing better than we were financially than the year before. And that was important to know, because as I was sitting there talking to him about how I feel the market has slowed down, we were actually doing better financially. And so that's where he was saying, it doesn't matter if the market's slowing down or not. That just means, the rules are kind of changing and you're trying to figure them out. And it going slower doesn't always lead to you making less money. That's just the process and how everything's moving in the market switching. But at the end of the day, if you're still getting buyers and sellers, whether it takes 2, 3, or 4 weeks longer to sell their house, or it takes 2 or 3 more weeks longer to find them a home because they have more options now, that doesn't mean you made any less money. So it's just really the statement that I was saying was, like I said, emotional and not logical. The one thing we want to realize, and I'm talking about the mindset, is, are the same amount of homes selling? I think that's important to note. When we're going through changing markets, we listen to the news, and it's the interest rates are rising and the inventory is rising and this and that. And like, we as realtors can get lost in the news, and we take that as sometimes as negativity, as, okay, it's taking 4 or 5 more weeks longer to sell a house. Houses are selling for less than what they were maybe 2 and 3 months ago. And you almost can hear that news and you start getting into a negative position daily. But really, and that's emotion. If you want to get to logic, you would really just look at and say, how many transactions are happening right now? And how you can do this is just pull up on your MLS every month if you want to, and say, go to closed and put in the last month and put and see how many actually homes sold. And as long as you still have the same amount of opportunity, and realize, when, let's say, 4,500 homes sold last month in your MLS, that was actually 2 sides of a transaction. So there was a listing side and a buying side. So if there was, 4,500 homes that sold, you had, 9,000 opportunities to help somebody. And you want to focus on that, because, just like I said, just because the market's switching around or changing or interest rates are going up, you just want to come to logic. It's like, okay, if the same amount of transactions are happening, then it's not a big deal. That just means the rules have changed and we got to play by different rules. And really, we got to learn how the game's going to be played and how that we can communicate that effectively to our clients. And so I've got a lot of realtors that reach out to me that have only been in the business for 2 or 3 years. And what I've noticed with them is they've only seen an up market. And that's where I think a lot of the frustration of things changing right now is, because, like I said, I've been selling real estate for 17 years. So I've seen things switch from buyers to sellers market. And I think I'm confident enough to know that you can still, as a realtor, make money in both markets, and you can help clients, and you can be effective in both markets. And so some of the realtors that I've been talking to have been selling real estate for 2 and 3 years and actually selling it at a high level. They've never seen a market switch ever in their career. Therefore, they're just a little bit hesitant on what the future brings. And what I'm finding is changing markets just leads to more inventory. And so those agents that have been doing this for 2 or 3 years, they might have always seen a low inventory. All that's happening right now, like really all that's happening that's changing in our market, is we're getting more inventory. And so as I sat down and wrote this note to myself, I thought, more inventory leads to expired and canceled listings. Okay. So as more and more inventory hits the market right now, I think what we're going to have in the future is we're going to have more expired and canceled listings. Like, there was a time many years ago when realtors would daily print off a list of expired and canceled listings. Like I said, if you've only been selling real estate for a few years, you're probably like, what is a canceled and expired listing? When you're just putting houses on the market and selling all of them, there's not very many, expired and canceled listings. As you get more and more inventory on the market, like we are now here in Arizona, that means you're going to start seeing more and more expired and canceled listings. But so why I bring that up is then I go to, well, why do listings cancel, right? Like, why does somebody say to a realtor, I want to sell a home? And then let's say 6 months down the road or 3 months down the road, when the contract expires, it goes canceled. Why does that happen? And so I wrote down the two things. It's a realtor who doesn't know how to deliver data. So it's a realtor who doesn't know how to effectively communicate the market to a client, or it's a realtor that knows how to effectively communicate, and it's a seller that doesn't want to listen to that person, that realtor, and participate in this market. And it could be either or. And so how I know that is because I remember it was probably 2019, and I knew this because I taught it when I was teaching one of my classes. I brought up this data, but I think it was 2019. I had 3 deals that year that I had closed, listings that were previously other realtors' listings, and they expired. And when they expired, those people were referred to me by someone in my network, and I got those homes sold. What's interesting is I believe all 3 of those situations, when I sat down at their kitchen table and talked about selling their house, I had told them that their price was too high. And when I told them that their price was too high, I had asked them, who had told you to price this home here? And they had said, my realtor. And I said, did they ever have conversations with you on reducing it? And they said, no. And that's when I realized right there, I was like, okay, like they listed their properties, priced it lower than what their other agent had listed it for. And I had sold all 3 of them. So it just showed you right there. When I asked those people, did your realtor ever talk to you about price reductions? They said, no, like this would follow. I said, there was 2 categories. There's the realtor who doesn't know how to deliver the data. And then there's sometimes the realtor's delivering the right data, and it's the client that's not understanding of it and doesn't want to do anything. So these clients that I met weren't getting the data delivered to them properly by their realtor. And that's the reason they didn't close those homes. And so you can see now, and that's why I bring up a changing market leads to, when more inventory is hitting the market, we're going to get more and more inventory. As we get more and more inventory, houses are going to cancel and expire. And that's why I brought up, why do houses cancel or expire? It's either a realtor who doesn't know how to deliver the data, or a client who doesn't know how to hear the data and process that effectively to sell a house, or they don't have a big enough need to do what you're telling them to do to get to where they want to go. So as you hear those now you got to look at it and say, this listing consultation is more and more important than ever. When houses are just selling for 50 and 100,000 over list price, you could have just walked into a listing in 5 minutes and just said, hey, we're going to price it here. We're going to get many offers. They're going to come in here, and I'm going to leverage the offers against each other, and you're going to get the best deal, sell it for a lot more than list price. We're good to go, right? Everyone's excited. Easy for the realtor to list the property. Seller's excited. I'm getting way more than it's listed for, and they're excited, right? So now what we got to do is you've got to look at your problems now, or what you think are your problems, and get in front of them. That's all you're doing right now in a listing, is getting ahead of your problem. And so right now I want to go through how to do an effective listing consultation, because I think if you can just come from that perspective of how do I properly do a listing consultation, then I don't think you're going to run into trouble. Now, am I saying that you're not going to ever have a canceled or expired listings? You will, but this is to set you up for the most success, because like I said, what you're going to find out right now is the rookie agents are going to be listing properties, and they're not going to know how to effectively communicate to their client. And then they're going to see when that listing expires that they end up hiring another realtor. You're going to look up and be like, wow, why did that house sell in 3 weeks after that realtor listed it? And how did they get them to price it lower? And that's where you've got to look in the mirror now and say, maybe this is something I have to be better at, not something that the client needs to be better at. And so to go into a listing consultation, there's a few things. So when you're going into a listing consultation, before you get there, you're looking at it and you're saying, I got to determine price, right? So you got to determine price when you're there. You got to determine a showing schedule. And why I'm bringing this stuff up is getting ahead of the problems. A showing schedule, when the market was moving so fast paced, price was easy. And when the market was moving so fast, we didn't have to talk too much about showing the house for 4 or 5, 6 weeks, 2 months, right? Getting the dog out of the house, the kids, it's nighttime, it's dinner. It was just, hey, we're going to list it on Wednesday. have an open house for 2 hours on Saturday and open house 2 hours on Sunday, get everybody to come through during that time, find you the best offer on Monday. We're going to take the best offer. We're good. You were just giving your client sometimes the seller 2 days, 2 hour windows for everybody to come to the house. And it was really simple for them. And so I bring up showing schedule now because, like I said, we're trying to get ahead of the problem. And so now you got to think you're going to be calling your clients often now and saying, hey, this person wants to show the home, and you've got to make sure that they're prepared for what's going to happen. So feedback. So you got to talk to your client about how you're going to start delivering feedback. Like I said, we're getting ahead of our problems. We didn't have to do this for a long time now. If you were in a market where there's very, very low inventory, it was show the house 2 times, offers. There was no having to get feedback from realtors. So we got price, showing schedule, feedback, weekly updates, great photos and putting it on the MLS, and the pending process. So like this is when I go into a listing consultation, these are the 6 things that I'm talking about. It's the price, it's our showing schedule, how I'm going to give you feedback, our weekly updates I'm going to do. We're going to get great photos and we're going to put it on the MLS. And I'm going to go over the whole pending process with them in the listing consultation of once we get an offer, this is what we do. And so those are the 6 things. I kind of want to break those down now and go into detail on some of those. So first is price. How to price a home. That's probably the hardest thing right now is how to price a house. I had a buddy of mine who's a realtor message me the other day and say, hey, Chris, can you look up this property? I put it on the market on Friday and it was Monday, but it was Monday when he texted me. He said, I put this on the market Friday and I have no showings. I don't feel like I priced it right. And I had said to him, I said, hey man, always remember, you know how to comp a house. And that's always been easy for you. And so you know how to comp a house, you know what it's worth. It's what will a buyer pay for it now with the inventory. So don't think that you don't know how to comp a house. And I explained to him, just for example, when I was selling houses for 100,000, sometimes 240,000, I think I sold one probably 2 months ago, I think for 240,000 over list price. And did I know that was going to sell for 240,000 over list price? No. Like we priced that home based on the comps, and the inventory shortage allowed that property to go for that much more. Think of that now in reverse. Like I wasn't bad at comping a house. They weren't going to walk around and say, Chris is terrible at pricing houses and I sold my house for 240 more. I was telling them, hey, this is actually based on the comps, what your house is worth. And there just being a lot of buyers out there and very little inventory of homes, you're going to sell for over. I didn't know it was 240. I could just tell them basically it was over. Now it's the same thing. I'm still telling them like, this is what your house is worth. But now with the inventory, now that we have more inventory, we're probably going to sell it for less. And I don't know for how much less. And so that's what you're going over with them. So you come from the perspective of, I think that realtors think that they have to like pinpoint exactly where you're going to be able to sell this house for. And now don't get me wrong. Do I think you've got to be able to give your clients a range? Yes. But I think you have to come from a perspective of I think you need to come from the realtor and consumer perspective and put yourself in their shoes sometimes and realize like they probably do want to test the market at this. And that's fine, as long as you have a game plan to get to where you need to go. So when I'm sitting down and talking about pricing to people, I say, that's fine if you price it there, as long as we have, a clear understanding of what the game plan looks like to get it to a position where we can sell it. So like I said, when you go now into a listing appointment, you've got to talk about how to price their house. But I want you to first come from that perspective of just look at the comps like you always have. And what's changing now is what we call the absorption rate. And if you've never heard of absorption rate, I want you to Google it, YouTube it, find something on YouTube where you can learn from somebody on absorption rate. I won't do it justice by explaining it on this podcast, but the absorption rate is basically you calculate how many homes are selling in a certain area. And it gives you, when you do this calculation, you see how many homes are getting absorbed, how many homes are selling in a month. And then what it does, that gives you how much supply you have. Like if nothing, and you're telling your clients, if nothing new hit the market, it's taking X amount of days to sell a house. Now that's super important. Like let's say you do the absorption rate and you're sitting down with your clients and you're saying, hey, based on the absorption rate, if nothing new hits the market, it's going to take you 7 weeks to sell your house. That's good data, because right there, you're saying if nothing new hits the market, It's going to take 7 weeks to absorb the market. It's going to take 7 weeks for the buyers to absorb the amount of listings in your area. Now, if houses are hitting every single day in that area, then it's not only 7 weeks, but it's actually it's leaning the other way. So you've got to start having those conversations with your clients of where are we going to price this property? So I want you to look into absorption rate, because that's going to help you determine price. So I said two things is when we're priced, we can tell them what the house is worth based on the comps today, but the absorption rate will swing which way you've got to go. Meaning when we were selling houses for $100,000 over list price, that was because the absorption rate was like literally so low. It was like, hey, if we put your house on the market right now, the absorption rate is 3 days or 7 days. That means if nothing new hits the market, everything's going to be absorbed in 7 days. That's why they were selling for so high. So I want to bring this back to like, these are data things that you talk to your clients about. This isn't a gut thing. It's not, oh, this is what your house is worth. And I don't know. You got to come from data. This is what your home, based on these comps that we're looking at, this is what it's worth right now. And based on the absorption rate, this is where it's projected to go. And we've got to make sure that we're in front of that. We got to get in front of the curve. So when you're going down to sit at their house, you want to know how to price a house. And by doing that, you need to know the comps. You need to know the absorption rate. And another thing that I do is I always want to know what Zillow and Redfin tell them it's worth. And not that I use, like, that's not accurate, right? Redfin and Zillow are not accurate on what your home's worth. It's what they're relying on. So almost everybody looks at that to kind of get a gauge. Now, whether they're $30,000, $40,000, $60,000 off, that could be. And that's where you come in with skill and absorption rate and how to sell a property. That's where your value is as a realtor. But you want to know that because you want to know going in what they think their home is worth. And so, and I ask people that question before I go to their house. I'll always try to find out what their loan payoff is. I'll ask them some questions. I'll say, hey, what's the reason you're selling? What's your loan payoff? And then what do you think your home is worth? Because I like to get that data. Their loan payoff is good to know because I know now how much equity they have in the process. Them telling me what they think their home is worth is great. Sometimes they don't tell me, so then I'll just go to Redfin and Zillow and look it up. So it's probably in their brain what they think it's worth. And then if I think it's going to sell for more, great. If I think it's going to sell for less or way less, I just kind of know going into that listing consultation that I might have to tackle that issue and be prepared for it. So that's how to price a house. So it's comps, absorption rate, and know what like the big data sites are. Redfin and Zillow and things like that are saying it's worth. Now, what we want to go over is in that listing consultation is showing schedule. And showing schedule is you want to be prepared now for working hours. Like, what are your work hours? Are there animals in the house? Do you have kids that are there for the summer? What's your night routine like? What are we going to do when we get, it's 5:30 p.m. and someone does a showtime request and says they want to see the house at 6. Like, they're giving you 30-minute notice. Why I do this is you got to think I've seen markets before where it takes 3, 4, and 5 months to sell a house, and we're having to show the house 5 and 6 times a week. And it's no longer buyers come at one time. It's buyers come whenever it's convenient to you. And when it's convenient to the buyers, it's not always convenient to the sellers. So I've got to work through this, because if I'm not proactive with this, then I'm going to have a client here in the next week or two who's kind of frustrated. So I like to eliminate all frustration out the gate. So I just say, hey, while we're here, let's go over a showing schedule. So we're going to have buyers that are going to be wanting to come look at the house, and we're not in a market anymore where we can just hold it open one time. And so what we've got to do is we got to talk this through. So what are your working hours? What are your night routines? Are there anything special that I need to know about? And, what are we going to do on weekends? What are we going to do at night times on weekdays? And then I always go through this, because this is one I find you want to get ahead of this is you want to get ahead of someone wants to see it in 15 minutes, because that always happens. There's always that realtor, and it's nothing wrong with the realtor. It's the client. They're driving in a neighborhood and they see your listing and want to see it as well. And they're calling you and they're sitting out front, or it's an online lead that comes into a realtor and they want to get into the house in 15 minutes to meet that new lead and see your house. And so instead of me going through this process with my client, why it's happening, like me for the first time texting my client saying, hey, there's somebody out in front of your house. Can you show it now? And then they're kind of frustrated at me. I get ahead of that. I let them know, hey, we're going to have some people who do this. What do you want to do in that situation? and then they process it right there. And what's good about that is they process it there with you. You come up with a plan when they're in a different state of mind, when they're in the let's get our house sold, not the frustration of my house has been on the market for 5 weeks. And they then know once it starts happening, wow, like he really knows the market that he knew that was going to come up. And so, like I said, we just want to be ahead of our issues. So that's our showing schedule, right? So now we've talked about when we go to a listing consultation, we need to know how to do price. We need to talk about a proactive showing schedule. Now we need to talk about feedback. So in that listing consultation, I'm saying, hey, this is how I'm going to give you feedback. I ask for feedback from every realtor. And so what I do internally, and I don't tell them this, but internally, I have a note on my phone, and it basically just says, hi, agent. And then it says, you showed the address. Would you be willing to give me any feedback on this property to better help my client? Let me know if you have any questions, and have a great day, Chris Bowers. And I have this note on my phone, and it has every property that I have listed. So what I can do is when the lockbox report comes to me via email or text, and I see that it got shown, I can then just copy that note right there, text it to that agent, and try to get feedback. So here's what you want to do, though, is what happens all the time is you don't get feedback from a lot of realtors. That's fine. They don't have to give you feedback. So instead of being behind the curve, get ahead of the curve. So what I tell my clients is, hey, every time your house is getting shown, I ask for feedback. Now, what's going to happen is a lot of realtors aren't going to give me feedback. So here's the deal. No feedback is feedback. If somebody doesn't give us feedback, that means that they didn't want your house. And so we have to just make our own assumptions of what's happening and process it. But you can see why I get ahead of that and tell them why I'm in the listing consultation, because let's say it's 2 and 3 weeks down the road, and all of a sudden you're not getting a lot of feedback from realtors, which you're not going to usually, then your clients aren't sitting there thinking like, why am I not getting any feedback? Or, hey, what'd that person think? So now when if my clients ever say like, hey, what'd that buyer think? And I'm like, I asked for feedback, but I haven't heard anything. Let's say the next day my client's like, hey, have you heard back on any feedback? No, I haven't. It's like I said in the listing, appointment, a lot of realtors won't give us feedback. And just to always remember, no, feedback is feedback. But I address that in the listing consultation because I know that their concerns are they want feedback. I know that I'm going to try to get it as their realtor and being good, but I know I'm not always going to get it. So you want to, like I said, proactively structure this in a listing consultation. Then you want to go, you want to talk about your weekly updates with them. And let's go back to, I want you to do this. So the feedback is when the realtors are coming through the house, that's that feedback. What I also want you to do is set up a portal. So however you set up homes for your clients in the MLS, set yourself up on one for every one of your listings and have it give you auto notifications. One, maybe for that specific subdivision, and then maybe like a general area of like a 1, 2, 3 mile radius of houses that are similar to your house, and get notifications when new listings hit the market, when things go under contract, and when things sell. Why you want to get a daily alert is when a market's changing and houses sit on the market for longer, you're trying to make sure that you're giving your client, your biggest thing is you don't ever want your clients thinking, I wonder what my realtor's doing. So you're looking for ways to proactively give them data. You don't want to be the realtor that every single week you're just calling them saying, hey, we need to reduce it 15. Hey, we need to reduce it 15. They need to be hearing from you throughout the week so that when you're calling them and having those conversations, they don't feel like you only call them when you're talking about a price reduction. You want to figure out how to give them data that they can process. And so that's why we set up an actual search for each listing, and I get notified. And so I'll look at the notifications when they come through and I'll decide, do I want to tell my client about this? And there's times where, let's say, a notification comes in and it says a house went pending in the same subdivision. I'll let my clients know hey, that property 4 doors down just went pending and it sold for this price. And then it's getting them to understand, let's say that house went under contract and it's just like your client's house for $40,000 less. They start feeling it. And what's good about it is you want to get in front of it. You don't want your clients texting you and saying, hey, did you see that the house 4 doors down just sold? Then they're kind of frustrated that not only are they telling you, but they're telling you and it's less than what their house sold for. It's better to be proactive, hey, did you see this? And you're sending that over to them. So how you stay in front of this, let's say you have 15 listings right now, how you can stay proactively throughout the week notifying your clients is setting yourself up on these alerts through your MLS system. Just treat yourself like you're the buyer in that community and set it up like that. So you can do the realtor feedback, and then you also can give them feedback as things are hitting the market. Then we want to talk about in that listing consultation, the weekly updates. Like I go through the consultation, I say, hey, every single Monday, I'm going to be doing a weekly update with you. Now, throughout the week, you're going to be hearing from me on, anytime a realtor wants to show the property, you're going to be hearing from my office. Anytime something, goes pending that you would need to know about, I'm going to be notifying you. And if we get an offer, obviously you're going to be hearing from me. But structurally in my office, outside of those things, weekly, I'm looking through your neighborhood, your data, and your specific situation. And I'm guiding you on what I think you should do. I tell them right there. There's going to be times that I'm just telling you, hey, here's the data, and we're just going to hold for a while on the price. There's going to be times when I call you and say, hey, I think we might need to reduce. I let them know, hey, you're the boss. I'm just telling you what's up. You're the boss. As if I tell you that stuff, I'm just telling you what has to happen to probably sell your house. And you get to tell me whether or not we do that or not. But you can see where I'm already laying the groundwork of how my systematic process works through the week of what we're doing. And then on Monday, what I'm doing as far as like telling them what their house, what's going on with the market, what we should do. And I'm already laying the groundwork right there of how these are, like the cadence of how these are going to be structured. And we're going over, I'm already using the word price reduction and letting them know that there's going to be times when I say just hold, there's going to be times where I'm saying reduce, and I'm letting them know right then that you're in control of the whole entire process. But I'm going through that in a listing consultation, so you can see now how I structure these is I don't get a lot of clients through this process that are frustrated. Now they might be frustrated at the market, but they're never frustrated at me. And those are two clear things that I take into consideration. When someone's frustrated, I always say, I process it and say, does it fall under they're frustrated with the market and they're just talking to me because I'm their realtor that they talk to and consult with, or are they frustrated with me? And as long as it's not me, I'm okay. Like they can be mad at the market. I can understand that. But I don't want it to be at me. So I got to make sure I'm structuring all this correctly. So then what we're doing, that's the weekly updates. That's prep them weekly for updates. You're selling them on the next step. So anytime you're talking to your clients, you're always selling them on what's going to be happening next and what you're going to be doing for them. Also, what you want to do is, so these weekly updates that you're doing every Monday, let's talk about how you do those. In the listing consultation, you're talking about that you are going to do them. And you can even explain what you're doing, but I want you now to know what you're trying to accomplish on these Monday weekly updates. So what I do is every week, I told you I have a search set up for their neighborhood, right? And what I do is every Monday I go into their actual, what I call portal for their neighborhood, and I start looking at it. And I think from the buyer's perspective, not their perspective, like a buyer. Buyers usually don't tell the realtor, I want to live in this specific subdivision. They usually tell the realtor, I want to live in this general area and I need to be under this price and I want these things. And so let's say like I'm selling a 3-car garage house with a pool in a certain city. Then you might like I'm looking for like, what's the avatar? The avatar for that house is going to be looking for a 3-car garage, wants a pool and wants under a certain price. So I'm pulling up that neighborhood and I'm seeing like, what new in the last week has hit the market? What are we competing with? What new this last week has went pending? What new this last week has closed? And so in my update, we actually have a formal email that goes out to them every Monday. And it says, this is, your address. This is how long you've been on the market. This was your original list price. This is where you're priced now. And then it goes through and it says all the feedback from all the realtors. And then it gives a note from me. So my assistant actually every Monday will put this together. Like I said, it's their name, it's their address, how many days they've been on the market, what was their original list price, where are they priced at right now, all the feedback, like a running tally of all the feedback. And every week she just adds the new feedback to the top of the list. And there's a lot of them that say the date and it says no feedback. I want my clients to know, like they see it visually. And if it goes on for 2 or 3 months that I'm selling their house, like they're going to see all the times where I get no feedback. And you would think, well, why would you be telling your clients no feedback? Like I want them to know, like I tried to get feedback. You're showing to them that you're doing all you can do to sell their property. And so when I'm doing these updates with them, it's like I said, client's name, days on market, original list price, current list price, all the feedback. Then it says Chris's remarks. And every week I change that. And I'll send them a link to whatever data I'm finding. And so, because you got to think, Sellers don't want you to just keep calling them and saying, hey, we need to reduce the price. We need to reduce the price. It sounds lazy. It sounds like the realtor is being lazy. Now, don't get me wrong. It almost always is price, but you can be understanding of how a process works to know that like it is usually because of price, but the consumer don't want to hear price. What you've got to do is you've got to put whatever is making you think it's the price. There's some data to that made you come up with that conclusion. Now, with us being realtors, it can sometimes just be our gut or just we understand the market. So we can just say, hey, you need to reduce the price. But there's data there that's making us make that decision. So what we got to do is deliver that data, and you are throughout the week. As you're sending them a house that just went pending down the street that was just like theirs that sold for 40. That's data. You're not saying reduce your price to them, but you are giving them data that makes them process that. And they're looking through the photos and like, that is just like our house and that's sold for that. And we're 40,000 higher. They're knowing now like, okay, like that's data. You're trying to give them data that when you talk about a price reduction, you've already given them enough data to validate that you are doing, you're giving them proper data. And so every Monday I'm giving them links, a link to the MLS, and I'm pulling out homes and I'm like, hey, here's 3 that just hit the market this week that are similar to yours. You're still price good. Or here's 3 that hit the market this week that are just like yours in your subdivision, but these 2 are priced actually better than yours and they're actually nicer inside. So I think we're gonna have to talk about that. And you're going through all this stuff and you're deciding what do we need to do. And you're trying to get, when you get on the phone with your clients every week, you want to get them in the buyer's shoes. So I tell them when I'm talking to them, hey, look at those 2 that just hit the market. Look at those. If you were buying a house right now in your neighborhood, which one would you pick? And you've got the 2 that hit the market and theirs. And like I said, it's data. They're starting to look at it from the buyer's position. They're like, yeah, like I would buy the one that's just like mine inside, but has a pool and mine doesn't, is 30,000 less. Yeah, I would. Then you're using days on market. Sometimes I'm, telling my clients like, hey, this one's been on the market for, 42 days and it's nicer than yours and it's cheaper than yours. So like we need to start using all these data as we've got to get ahead of the curve. Then what I want to talk about now is we're going into, because that was the weekly update. So now we've went through in the listing consultation, it's how to price a house. It's talking about the showing schedule. It's talking about how to give them feedback weekly throughout the week. Then it's talking about the weekly updates that I do on Monday. Then what I talk about is now I want to lean into, I want to take the listing now. So then I'm going into the next steps. Hey, we're going to get great photos for you and get you on the MLS. And when I say great photos, what I mean is drone photos and twilight photos. And we're in a market now where I think that you've got to start talking more about what you're going to do to sell their property. And I think what's going to be good is getting drone photos and twilight photos. And how I know those are great is because I'm looking for a vacation house right now in another state. And I'm going through a lot of listings on Zillow, on my portal my realtor has set up for me. And as you have more and more inventory, you're eliminating houses. You're not actually picking houses. And let me explain that. So when you're in a market where there's 3 options, you're just going out and looking at all 3 because there's only 3 options. When there's 92 options for you on the portal, you're literally there. The clients usually are just scrolling so quickly through those photos, it would make someone dizzy. But what they're trying to do is they go through those photos very quickly and they're trying to see, do they want to eliminate it? And they know most of them they're going to eliminate. So they go through, they swipe so quickly and they're really coming from usually first, how do I eliminate this property? And it usually gets eliminated. Or, I went through these 62 photos so fast and I liked what I saw instantly. Let me go through them slower now. Since I know that's how the consumer looks for homes, I want to get great photos. So I want to get drone shots of properties if they're on a good lot, corner lot, big lot, horse property, golf course, things like that. I also want to get twilight photos of properties whenever I feel like it's appropriate. I want to put them in the best position to shine when there's more and more listings on the market. So spend the extra money, and it's going to be a good thing in your listing appointments to do, just for the client to hear about how you advertise. And it's going to be good for you because the consumer really appreciates those. So great photos in the MLS. Buyers, like I said, are eliminating houses. They're not picking houses. Also, what I think you should do in this market, things are changing. You can't just sell a house usually overnight, is detailed instructions. If there's a showing schedule, put them in the realtor remarks. if you have an HOA, get the document, upload it into the MLS, be proactive with the realtors and getting stuff done. That has solar, maybe up in your state, if you're allowed to upload the lease into the MLS for the client, put that in there. Usually when there's solar, people want the electric bills to see what they're saving. Upload those if you can in your MLS. You're trying to sell this property. If it's not selling overnight, now you got to do a little bit more work. But I'm telling my clients, this is what I'm going to do for your house. You got to think, I'm coming from the perspective right now. When you're sitting at a listing appointment, people ask me all the time, well, how do you get people to price their house at that price? Or how do you do a listing consultation? I had one of my buddies a few weeks ago ask me like, hey, how are you doing these now? And this is how I do them. I'm talking about, once again, let's go through it. How to price a home, showing schedules. This is how I'm going to give you feedback throughout the week. This is how I'm going to give you weekly updates. Then we're going into great photos and MLS. And what I also do is talk to my clients and how we're going to advertise this on the MLS. This is the time where you could talk to them about, hey, let's advertise it. We're going to do some type of a concession. We'll give you X amount of dollars towards your closing costs, and that can buy down your interest rate. Because the buyers right now, their pain point is the interest rate. You could tell your clients, hey, instead of us keep reducing, let's get in front of this. This is really a interest rate and a payment problem, not a price problem. So maybe while we're reducing, we still have to do this, but I would start talking from that perspective. You want to be creative for your clients that this is the issue and this is how you can solve it. And then what I talk about in the listing consultation is the pending process. And that's just going through how the pending or the closing process works in your state. So in our market, I would be talking about, hey, like, okay, so now, because you're going through all the stuff, now you're saying, okay, once we get an offer, then this is how we're going to accept the offers. Once we go under contract, this is how we're going to look at the offer, and we're going to make a decision on whether or not we should take it. Once we go through the inspection, this is how we're going to process whether or not we want to do repairs or not. I'm talking to them about how we probably want to be open-minded to fixing repairs, talking about the appraisal process, and talking about the closing day. But right there, like, you can see where that buttoned up a whole entire listing consultation. And so if you just go into those listing consultations and just do that now, and then you do that listing consultation, you tell people exactly how you're going to deliver on your service, and then you start delivering on it. And then when you put that house on the market, let's say it doesn't sell the first week, which it probably won't. Well, then they've heard from you throughout the week on what's going on when you get those emails, those alerts from the MLS that are telling you what's up with other houses. And then they're hearing from you on Monday, and you're giving them data and you're telling them what's going on. And then you'll realize, like, when people ask me, hey, Chris, how are you like getting price reductions right now? It's simple. I over communicate data to my clients that when I talk to them about price reductions, they're usually sold on it. Are they happy about it? No, but are they okay doing it? Yes. And let me just give you like a few examples. I had one on the market, I think for 575. I mean, I put it on the market and almost no showings. It was like literally just nothing, 14 days. And you're just like, whoa. And I told them, I was like, and I'm doing the updates with them. Finally, I think about the 14th day, I was like, hey, we need a drop. I think we did a $20,000 price reduction, and then kept giving their data. And then it was about, I think 8 days later, we made another, I think it was 15,000 price reduction. And I remember talking to them, and how I explained it to them is these were clients that I knew they needed to sell their house about 4 months ago. And I remember getting on the phone with them about 4 months ago and kind of sounding the alarm. I'm that guy. And I was saying, hey, I can see things changing in the market. I know you want to sell in like 2 or 3 months because your job's relocating. Let's get your house on the market now and capitalize. And they were slower to the punch, and they were kind of frustrated about it later. Hindsight's always 20/20, right? And so when I'd been going through that, telling them put their house on the market, and they didn't. And they were going so slow with the process, which is fine. It's on their terms. Well, anyways, once they put their house on the market, we were in a different market. So when I was talking to them about reducing, I was letting them know, hey, remember 3 months ago when I was the guy calling you and sounding the alarm that we needed to get your home on the market, and we probably would have sold your house for about $70,000 to $80,000 more just based on the inventory? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, now I'm the guy again that's sounding the alarm the other way. I'm one that's always willing to look at data and react to it. And I want to see data and react quickly to it. I don't want to wait 3, 4, 5 months for my clients to just see it from them on their own. I want to be able to like get this information out to them quickly. So, but I say that in a way where like, I do always feel like I'm the one sounding the alarm because I'm trying to get them to look 2, 3, and 4 weeks down the road and say, we need to make decisions based off that data and not today's data. And it translates differently for everybody, but that was one scenario. I had another one. We priced it, I think at $595. We dropped it $20,000 about 2 weeks after we were on the market. Then we dropped it another, I think, $25,000 on the market. And then we ended up taking an offer that was 10,000, I believe, lower than that. And that was just perspective. That client, what I did is I talked to them. They had bought their house about 2 years ago. They were going to make still about $190,000, even with those reductions. And so I had to get them into a different perspective. That perspective was, hey, you just bought this house 2 years ago. And even with these price reductions, you're almost making $200,000. And I had to get them to change their perspective of feeling like, oh, I just lost money, and getting them to realize like you just paid for a mortgage for 2 years and you're walking away still with almost 200 G's. And that's what I find my job is. Every seller is a little bit differently. And I'm trying to just sometimes, and I'm sometimes just trying to change their perspective of looking at this data a little bit differently, where we're more happy about the situation and we're not bummed about it. Not saying that everyone's happy, but that's my goal when I get on these is know the client's personality, what emotions they're dealing with, just who they are, their personality, what they're dealing with, and trying to consult them with the data and saying what I think they should do next. So that's what's going on there as far as how I do my listing consultations. I guess I should, and this isn't in my notes, but I want to add it, is probably should talk a little bit about finding out what their need of moving is. This is now a market where you're going to find out that the people who need to move are the ones that move, the ones that wanted to move that have no need don't. So like if somebody tells, like if I know someone needs to move, like they have to move and they want to overprice their home, as long as they're fine with my game plan, I'm usually cool with it. Like, hey, do you want to overprice it? As long as you're fine with our process and I feel that you need to sell your house and you're going to get to the price that it's going to take to sell it, I'm good. If they don't need to sell their house and they want to and they have nowhere to go, and as long as they can get this price, they'll sell it, but no less. They have no need. Those are the people that I wouldn't overprice their house and probably wouldn't take their listing, because that'll just be a canceled or expired listing in 3 months. And that'll be one that hits the market. And that'll be someone calling that person and saying, hey, your realtor couldn't sell it. And they're going to find out it wasn't me that wasn't telling them the right news. It was them not wanting to hear the news. So that's how my listing consultations go. So in the changing market right now, when I started this off with the title, The Market Has Changed, Have You? That's how you change on the seller side. So on the listing side, let's talk about the buyer side, and then I'll be wrapping up. So the buyer side, you got to think from their perspective now is price reductions. They're looking at a changing market. They're looking at so many things reducing, and they almost are like, wait, why would I buy a house now? Everything's reducing. And I've had clients call me and say, hey, Chris, like I'm noticing a ton of price reduction. What's up with that? And I just let them know. I say, hey, when we're in the middle of a switching market, when we're in the middle of things changing, that means you're going to see a lot of price reductions because the market's changing. So everyone, like someone could have put their house on the market 9 weeks ago, and now today's data, like it's totally different. They've got to reduce. So I said, in a changing market, you are going to see a lot of price reductions and possibly even drastic ones. I got to get them to understand that just because someone made a $30,000 or $40,000 price reduction doesn't mean that keeps going. Could, I don't know. But I let them know, like that's what a market changing looks like, is price reduction happening. We're almost trying to figure out where is the new baseline. Once we figure out the new baseline, let's say 3 or 4 months down the road, and we know the new baseline, then people are probably going to be going off comps of like, oh, well, that's what that one sold for. And we're just kind of in a new era. But right now it's the switching of eras. And so that's where you will see a lot of price reduction. So I talked to them about that. Interest rates. Your clients are looking at this like, wow, buyers are like, I could have got an interest rate 3.5 2 or 3 months ago. Now we're at 6%. Their payments are different. Their payment now is so much more for a house, even though prices went down a little bit. They feel like there's some trick being played on them. Like the prices went down 40,000, but the interest rate went up 2%. So now I actually am paying more per month for a house of less. And so you've got to talk them through that. So what you've got to do on the interest rates, what I explain to my buyers now is, here's the deal. Interest rates are either going to go up or down. If they go up, you're going to be so thankful that you locked in today's rate. Now, you might be mad that it's at this rate today, because the being bummed is because it was cheaper 2 and 3 months ago. The rate was lower 2 or 3 months ago. So you're kind of bummed that today you're doing this rate. But here, let's look down in the future. And that's what you got to do, is change their perspective. Let's look at the future. And what if it goes up 1 or 2 more percent? You're actually going to be happy that you locked it in today. And if it goes down over the next year or two, you most likely would just refinance your loan. So in both those scenarios, I think you're most likely going to be okay or happy. If you lock it in now and it goes higher, you're going to look back and be like, ooh, so glad I made that decision. Or you're going to be like, oh, the interest rates went down 2%. I'm refinancing and get a cheaper payment. Probably going to be happy with that decision as well. So it's just framework. You're trying to reposition things, these fears or concerns that your clients have. You're trying to reposition these things in their brain so that they can come from a different perspective. Seller concessions. Now is the time to be game planning with a lender. Like, you need to have a lender right now that can really game plan. And you could be like, hey, if my clients could get X amount of dollars, let's say $10,000 in seller concessions, what could you do with that to buy down their rate? And because you're going to be able to go find right now that there are sellers that will give that much towards seller concessions, and that can buy down the rate. So you just want to, but think this through. Like, when you're sitting down with a buyer now, like, where is your value as a realtor? When there's so many realtors out there, what's your value? So when you're doing a consultation with them and you're talking about, hey, what we're going to try to do is, in certain situations, we're going to try to get the seller to pay a lot towards your closing costs. That's going to buy down your rate. If we can buy down your rate to this, that's going to save you, $130 a month. There it is. They're starting to see like, okay, this is a realtor I want to work with. He's thinking about me. He's trying to save me money. He's not just trying to get me into a house. He's talking about strategy and game planning in today's market on how he's going to do what's best for me, give me the best price, give me the best interest rate. And then getting your clients to write offers. When there's more and more inventory hitting the market, they can just be like, oh, okay, well, there's 5 more tomorrow and there's 5 more tomorrow. They kind of get to that spot where it's like, there's always more inventory. Sometimes the prices are coming down, so there's always more inventory and the houses are cheaper. And they're looking at it like, I could just stall here forever. And sure, they could, but it's also, you're going back to their needs of why they want to buy a house. And do you want to wait forever to buy a house, or do you want to buy one now if you found the right one? So to get clients to write offers in a market where more and more inventory is hitting the market, and they possibly are going down a little bit every day, it's just letting them know, hey, we can start trying to get ahead of that curve. So just like, we're going to go look at houses, and when you like one, we can go make that offer. So if you're not making an offer because you think it's going to be $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 less in 2 months, well, we can just go out the gate and make that offer to them. So just like, you don't have to sit on your heels and wait for them to get there. Like, you can go out and make that offer to them and see if they take it. That gets them in the rhythm of making offers. And once you can get them in the rhythm of making offers, and they see how simple it is to get in and out of to send an offer, then you start getting the ball rolling. So that's how, in a market where there's more and more inventory, if you have a client that's just been looking for, a long time and they're not making an offer, that's stuff that you want to bring up is, hey, like, let's shoot our shot on this one. Or ask them like, hey, what, do you like this house? And they're like, yeah. And say, do you want to make an offer? I don't know right now. Well, what would be the reason you didn't want to make an offer? Well, I don't know. Maybe it's going to be cheaper in the future. Well, how much cheaper do you think it's going to get? I don't know. Maybe it's going to be 15 or 20,000 less in a month or two. Okay, well, why don't we make that offer to them and see? So you can see where you're hearing their concerns and trying to come up with solutions. So also what I want to go over in this changing market is just going back to mindset before we wrap up, is mindset. When a client backs out, be excited still. I want to note that, come from the, because I've seen it before happen out there. As a buyer backs out, it's almost like the realtor's disappointed. And sometimes the realtor's disappointed because they're like, I've got to show them more homes. And that's something that I really want to make sure that when someone says they want to back out of a house, really figure out why. I'm not saying don't consult them or don't talk to them about the issue, but like, when you really know they want to back out and there's nothing you could do to solve this equation, make them feel good about it, because making them feel good about it makes them realize that you're there for them and not just for the transaction or the commission. But when they say, hey, you know what, this is a valid concern and I don't want to move forward, and I know I can't solve that, and it's a done deal, lean into it and just be like, yeah, that's totally fine. Let me back you out. As easy as I said it's to get into a contract, as easy as we can get you out of that contract, as long as we're in the appropriate timeframes of the inspection period, let's get you out of that. Let's start looking at houses again. Get excited about it. So anytime someone says they want to back out of a house, after I've processed that there's no other options and they really are going to back out, I get excited with them. I'm like, let's back you out of that property. We're going to find you the best one. Let's get out there and look at home. You being excited at the time that they're disappointed and backing out, you're transferring that energy to them, and they're realizing like, oh yeah, like let's get back out there. The second you're bummed about it, almost as if like, okay, well now I got to go show you some more homes. Now they're kind of bummed that that house didn't work out. And then you're not bringing them any good energy on, you're not making them feel any better. It's just not a good look. So when someone wants to back out and it's, for valid concerns, nothing more you can do about it, just lean into that, be excited. Also, when a seller won't reduce their price, you have no control over them reducing the price. You have every control over giving them the data to try to get them to reduce the price. So I just focus on what I can control in these markets. And so with the sellers, the mindset is as long as I'm telling them the data and giving them the news, you can't let the market right now, because it'll start happening. If houses start sitting on the market for 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, I've seen it. When they sit on the market for, and I'm not saying it's going to happen, I'm saying as houses sit on the market for longer and longer, you start feeling this weight when you have 5, 6, 10, 15 listings, and you've got all these clients that they're wanting you to sell their house, and you're holding more and more inventory, and you've got all these sellers' emotions. All you've got to do to make sure that you can still live your quality life while trying to sell these people's property is, am I giving them all the data that they need? And if you're giving them all the data they need, you're letting them know when things are going under contract, you feel like you're marketing it properly, you're giving them the weekly updates on what they should be doing, and you're advising them. If you're doing all that, then you're doing your part to get the property sold. You can't hold all the weight of the market on your shoulders. You can just deliver news to them. And this is a market where you are going to have some people that bow out of the process and say, I don't want to sell anymore. It was just like 4 and 5 months ago when I had a lot of buyers that would bow out because they emotionally couldn't stand the market anymore. They were fatigued and they bowed out. Well, what's good for them is now they're buying homes. You're going to start seeing sellers. It was so simple to sell a house. Now you're going to start seeing some sellers that are fatigued and they just emotionally don't want to go through the process. And what you'll find is those usually aren't the ones that really needed to sell their house. So that's why in the listing consultation, you want to really find what is their need to sell that house, because you want to bring them back to that all the time, whether they need a downsize, upsize, relocate to another state, a job relocation. You got to bring them back to that. They're moving to another state to be closer to their grandkids. When you're talking about that price reduction, you remember that. And you're not always bringing it up or you look salesy, but you're remembering the reason why they're doing this, so that when it's appropriate, you can get them back to that. Remember, this is why we're doing this. That's why we got to get here, and getting them back to the need. But that's today's podcast, guys. I thank you for listening to this. Like I said, this is just framework of about 7 weeks ago when the market started shifting. I had to sit down and just really process this. Like I said, like a diary. I was just counseling myself. I had notes on my phone, and that's what I just went over today. I hope that helped. If you guys have any questions, just always feel free to reach out, and I hope you all have a great day.